brought to you by
Cry Havoc, from New York Times #1 best-selling author Jack Carr. Cry Havoc, a Tom Reese thriller. Order now.
But as an honorable people who lived up to their pledge to defend democracy,
it's their war. They're the ones who have to win it or lose it.
All right, give me some.
Picking of the first dates for the draft.
And sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you stop now. Don't you sit down on the steps, cause you find this kind of hard. But I still going, boy. I still climbing. That's the way it is.
Moon's out and everything, and I just stood there at the door. I said, I'm alive today thanks to these guys. I'm going back to America and they're still here going to be fighting the war. In our day, they were called triple volunteers. We volunteered for the Army, volunteer for jump school, and then volunteer for special forces. And in the book, The Green Berets, they talked about the camaraderie, the spirit of the Green Berets in that book. I knew I was going to go. If I go, I want to go with the Green Berets if I can get through the training. And got through the training, that's where I went. We left for Vietnam right around April 26th, 27th, 1968. See, this is the overall FOB, FOB-1 from the helicopter. And this is Highway 1 with the King Bees on the launch pad ready to go. When Johnny McIntyre and I landed at Phu in the South Vietnamese Air Force, the King Bees, we got off and a recon team, Spike Team Idaho, got on. We just passed. It's like we're green ass replacements and they're hardcore veterans. They got on the helicopter, went on a mission, and were never heard from again. That was the second time that team was wiped out. Because Idaho had been wiped out before that. And that was our introduction to MACV-SOG, the Secret War in Vietnam. Oh, here's the Gono Spider. So this is Spider Parks on the left, and me with my Trenton State College. Robert J. Spider Parks. He was almost like a big brother to me. And I met him in training group, and we became friends. If you want to see Spider in his car, he had an 88 Oldsmobile. For 2 days, there was uncertainty about the status of Spike Team Idaho. Then it became official that they were officially listed as missing in action, and Spider had to rebuild the team. And he brought the team together, and we began very intensive training after that point. And that's how we transitioned from the wiped out team to putting together Idaho again. Again, this goes back to October, the pre-mission photo, right that day. The Spider got promoted to a cubby rider. Don Wolken became the team leader. I got promoted to the assistant team leader, 1-1, but I always carried a radio. And Jim was the extra American on the team. So this is Sal, Hep with his sunglasses, Fook, our point man. And again, this is before we launched on October 6, 1968 into Target Echo 4, E4. So we were on the ground for the first day. We moved through the jungle. We had been on the ground for maybe 2 hours, and we heard all this noise coming towards us. And we thought it was the NVA at first. The team quickly gets online. We pulled the pins out of the hand grenades, and we got overrun by monkeys. It's like, welcome to the jungle, you know? So they scattered over us. We were just glad the monkeys went by and left us alone. We put the pins back in. And then within a half hour, Fook and Don were stung several times. They hit a bee's nest. Those are the little things, life in the jungle. With Special Forces, we pride ourselves on working with our indigenous troops. And in the Vietnam War, you had different races. We had South Vietnamese men on our team. But this is Sal and Hep. And they're sitting on my bed in the hooch. And I told them I wanted to get one picture. I said, someday I want to look at this picture. So someday is now looking back on them. And this would be the fall of '68. When I met Hep the first time, he had a really cool black hat with Vietnamese jump wings on it. And he had sunglasses on. So instantly, Hep was the coolest guy on the team. He also spoke total 4 or 5 languages. And just an amazing guy. And a smart ass. You know, he had that South Vietnamese. He'd been around the Americans enough that he could sharpen his wit a little bit, but very impressive. And Sal was just quiet. And I knew he had wanted to be a farmer, left his farm to come work with SOG, because he didn't want to serve with a traditional South Vietnamese unit. And he was just an amazing man in the jungles. When I first met Hep and Sal, I knew I had to earn their respect. That's part of this reciprocity between each other. And then Sal turned to Hep and whispered, looking at me, saying I'm too tall, my feet are too big, and I look stupid. So I had to earn his respect, and vice versa. He was so good he could smell the enemy. And we were never ambushed. Whenever they got close to us, Sal and Hep or Fook would be the first ones to alert us to the danger. And they always opened fire first on the NVA that were coming at us through the jungle. Next morning, first light, we're ready just in case we got hit, because the NVA had sapper units. These would be anti-SOG teams, and they were hunter-killer teams. They trained to kill the Americans but leave the indigenous people alive for psychological purposes. Well, we were ready, but we didn't get hit. We moved out, and around 2 o'clock, we finally got to the top of a little knoll. And we were taking a quick break. I was opening a can of apricots, and Hep and Sal heard the enemy, and they opened fire on the enemy. And that began our heaviest contact that I'd ever seen at that point. And it went on for at least 4 hours. They kept coming wave after wave towards us. And we were fortunate in that the knoll was small enough that they could only mass so many men at one time. They would come, we'd blow them back, they'd come again, and that rhythm went on for quite a while. And they were only maybe 10 to 12 yards away from us, but they were still in the triple canopy jungle. A lot of times you wouldn't even see them. You would see their AKs or them shooting bullets at us, and we would shoot into the jungle and blow them back in the jungle, back down the hill. In the very early stages, there would be this full automatic AKs, our guys shooting, and then all of a sudden everything would stop, sound-wise. All you hear were guys slamming into new magazines, and then back to the full automatic, and it was just ongoing. There's like one time I'm shooting at the main wave coming at us, and Fook was killing the people down the hill, and I thought he was just shooting over my shoulder. So the next day we're doing the after action report. We talked to each other, lessons learned, and at the end of it I asked Fook, I said, how come you were shooting over my shoulder? And he goes, I wasn't. They were NVA, they were trying to get ready to kill you. Up and they're aiming at you, and I killed them. It's like, oh, okay. After the firefight had been going on for 2 hours, we had killed so many that they began stacking dead bodies to try to get a higher elevation so they could shoot down at us. We were a couple hours without TAC air, and then finally TAC air came in, fast movers, A-1 Sky Raiders, everything from gun runs, dropping 250-pound bombs, napalm, later cluster bomb units, and then we had helicopter gunships. the muskets that made gun runs, and I directed all the airstrikes. At one point I was talking to Spider on the radio, and down the hill I could see some motion. It turned out it was an NVA that was crawling up the hill towards us with his AK-47. I turned around and fired one round and shot him in the head. His head exploded, but I still had the radio open. And Spider freaked out because the sound of the round that I shot damaged his ears and just exploded in the radio. So that night we get back to base, he chewed my ass out and said, from now on, always let go of the handset when you're shooting. Lessons learned the hard way. That last hour, we were getting low on ammo, low on hand grenades. We were getting low on everything. I always carried 10 to 12 rounds for the M79, 10 to 12 hand grenades, battery for the radio, and then of course the 600 plus rounds in 20 round magazines with 18 rounds per magazine. And then at last light, a Spider saw an area big enough for a King Bee to hover. He couldn't land because of the vegetation. So Captain Tin flew in, hovered for 10 minutes, and we had to go through elephant grass to get to it. This is a picture drawn by Green Beret medic Sam McIntyre, and it depicts, in fact, let me put on my official King Bee hat. This is a King Bee flown by Captain Tin. Here he is hovering with bullets going into it and looking down at us, just as cool as the Rocky Mountain breeze. That's what I always said. Oh, every time I look at that picture, I'm back. We finally get to the helicopter under heavy enemy fire. It looked like hundreds of weapons in the jungle, all shooting at us as we left at last light. You had the dark evergreen jungle with all these little sparks coming in, green tracers coming up at us. And Don and I threw the first 4 people in, and then Don's the team leader, he should be the last man out. He grabbed me, threw me up. Well, something happened, I broke loose or fell. I turned around and just grabbed him by the lapel. 230 pounds, my adrenaline was pumping. I picked him up and just threw him up to the King Bee. He grabbed on, got in, he reached down and pulled me in, and we extracted. The helicopter's rising, we all fired our last rounds at the enemy. We learned later that that King Bee had 48 bullet holes in it, and nobody was shot. But we were happy to be alive. And again, there had to be some divine intervention in there. As we were leaving, we got up and you could just see the sunset. It was beautiful. And I looked over at Sal, and Sal gave me a nod. And that was the most significant nod I ever received in my life, because that was like, you done good, you know? To me, that was a moment of really being accepted. So that was my first major contact with the team. You know, a lot of people are critical about the Vietnam War, the domino theory, that part of what we got there on. But my Vietnamese, particularly the guys from North Vietnam, they told us our family left North Vietnam to come to South Vietnam, and our team knew that their government in South Vietnam was corrupt. They knew it, but they would rather live with a government that was corrupt, that they knew that they could live with, than to be under the thumb of communism. And they were willing to die fighting for that, rather than being a communist. And that was one point that, in my mind, that's all I needed to hear. Once we were on the ground, the politics left our mind. It was just to accomplish the mission and worry about the man to the left and to the right of us. To do the mission and to get the team back in one piece. That was the priority, always was. I came home realizing and knowing that none of our guys had been killed during my tenure on the team. Throughout '68, those missions, there were so many times that the King Bees landed and pulled us out under fire like that day there with Captain Tin, time and time again. And they did it for years. And whereas me, it was just 19 months of my 2 tours of duty there. And the hardest time for me was the night that I left. I went down, I gave the team $500. We had a huge party. We ate and drank. Each one of my guys passed out one by one. Hep was the last one, still awake, like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. And we're outside, we're talking. The moon's out and everything. Do you need anything else? I said, no, Hep. He literally collapsed in the sand, passed out. I picked him up, I dusted him off, carried him back to the team room, put him in bed, covered him up with a poncho liner, and I just stood there in the door. I said, I'm alive today, in early April 1970, thanks to these guys. I'm going back to America, and they're still here, going to be fighting the war. And so today, every day, ever since that day, I've always thought about the guys on the team, the King Bee pilots, the aviators that put their lives on the line for us. But first and foremost, Hep and Sal and the other guys on the team. Here today, thanks to them.